Overcommitment plus self-abandonment leads you to burnout. It's a pattern we've been talking about, but underneath the pattern for a lot of vet professionals is this concept of moral injury. And I want to make sure that we're thinking about these repeated small moments where you acted against your own value system, your own authentic values, either because the system made you, the environment pressured you to do so, or you weren't strong enough to speak up for what you truly know is right. For example, maybe the client couldn't afford the surgery. Maybe the corporate policy limited what you could offer. Or maybe you euthanized when your gut said to refer. Maybe you euthanized when a customer came in for that behavioral euthanasia. You watched a colleague make a call that you disagreed with and you sat by silently instead of speaking up. Case after case, we can find these small moments where we betray ourselves for the process. Hello, and welcome to the Evolved Vets podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bethany Weinheimer. Hi, friend. If you're new here, hit the follow so you don't miss what's ahead. And if you're ready to take this work beyond the podcast, you can learn more about my coaching program and membership at theevolvedvets.com. Welcome to the Evolved Vets podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bethany Weinheimer. And today I want to dive into a topic that's been swirling around veterinary medicine and has recently really been proven in human medicine as well. And this topic is called moral injury. Moral injury refers to the psychological, social, and spiritual distress that occurs when an individual perpetuates, witness, or fails to act on something that they deeply believe in. So for example, if you're going against your own moral beliefs and having to do an action that doesn't necessarily align with who you are, it fundamentally creates a profound breach in one's ethical code, your authentic values, you might say. And this results in a deep betrayal and really shows a wound underneath that a lot of us have seen this lead to burnout in veterinary medicine. And this is such an important topic to deep dive and better understand because it doesn't respond to rest the way that maybe an exhaustion phase might look. And it does lead to those clinical signs of burnout. So it's kind of before what we might see develop in the future of the burnout process. And so in this episode, we're going to dive into the Evolved Vets method and better understand meditation, elevation, and integration to actually give listeners a path on how to work through moral injury and really prevent those code blue moments that come up from repeated moments of self-abandonment. And so when we think about moral injury, something that commonly comes to my mind is going to be this thought of cognitive dissonance or the thought of you doing something that is not aligned with who you are and how you view the world. This week, I was at the AVMA and I heard this study that was just done by Dr. Gershon. It was published and he gave his dissertation a few months ago and he actually told us what he found. And there's not a ton of things that actually help prevent moral injury, but there was one that really stood out. And that is going to be a 37% increase in prevention to moral injury was because of resiliency. And this is kind of giving words to what I've said all along. You become a better leader, a better person, more likely to stay in vet med when you develop tools for resiliency in this field. So saying things like, we don't have it, we just can't, or even those tough moments of euthanasia without finances. These are all moments where we can build resiliency to better understand who we are, what we're willing to do, and how we prevent moments of self-abandonment when that really comes to life in what we see. And there's something very clear I want to point out here when it comes to nervous system regulation. The truth of the matter is when you are a person that is affected by this and your personal authentic values do not align, those are the moments that create moral injury. One example that he gave during his lecture was there was a woman in his clinic that her 10-year-old Yorkie was the only thing holding her left to her husband who had already passed. And he gave away a free ultrasound to better understand why this Yorkie was so sick. When he did, this owner found out that there was a gallbladder mucocele. And in that moment, with the mucocele present, she had to make a decision. Does she go to specialty, perform a $10,000 surgery, or does she choose to humanely euthanize your dog? And in that moment, that's exactly what she chose. She chose euthanasia. And for him, this was a moment of moral injury because he didn't feel like it was within his ethical code to do surgery on a patient that ultimately could have been saved. We know in veterinary medicine that many times if you have your gallbladder removed after a gallbladder mucocele, that you're probably going to be okay. And so when we think about this concept of moral injury, it's really about the individual nervous system and the individual's values. Just because one person has moral injury to the same situation doesn't mean you have the same thing. For example, I was talking with a colleague after the lecture, and she was telling me a story about a blocked cat that she had to euthanize. And there was a moment where she essentially said, it is hard when I have to euthanize patients, but I have built up a resiliency and a process in my nervous system to process those cases. And I feel better personally not letting that pet go home and suffer and die alone. I would rather choose euthanasia for them. And for her and her authentic values and her regulated nervous system, she was better able to say, for me, that same moment with a different case didn't cause moral injury, because for me, it's not out of line with my personal beliefs. Like for her, she believes that euthanasia is a gift and that those are small moments that can really highlight their excellence and effectiveness. And it's a battle because everyone is different, right? And so what we need to do is take inventory of our own authentic values, see what we believe in, and then stand up for those moments to prevent self-abandonment and really lean into this concept of, is this creating moral injury for me? And it's okay if that's a yes or a no, depending on the situation. Not everyone's nervous system is the same. Not everyone's resiliency levels are the same. And there's nothing wrong with you if you do experience moral injury from these moments. That's another thing. This is completely normal. It is across vet med, is across human medicine, and it is an important topic to talk about. So let's do a little bit of a dive deeper on moral injury. Now, there are a few components that usually stand out in identifying moral injury. Usually there's a self-directed emotion. So there might be feelings of overwhelm, guilt, or shame. It can also cause a worldview shift. So a profound sense of broken trust in yourself. Or maybe one example that he gave during the lecture was like, the vet I thought I was going to be when I was growing up didn't end up being the veterinarian that I actually show up as today. So really shifted views. And then there's another one around institutional authority. And then the third that we see is social withdrawal. So feelings of worthlessness leading to isolation, apathy, and difficulty reconnecting with the community and family. So these are usually signs we start to see when that moral injury occurs. And oftentimes those can progress down to compassion fatigue and even burnout. We also discussed like the difference between moral injury and PTSD because they can occur together. Moral injury is not the same as post-traumatic stress disorder. They're just not the same. And so let's talk through what that is. PTSD is primarily a fear-based reaction center on survival, where the core issue is an inability to feel safe, versus moral injury is more a violation of your consciousness and your trust. And that leads to moral emotions such as shame and anger or frustration, or even apathy when it progresses very far, instead of fear, which is oftentimes kind of the starter point for PTSD. But of course, if you're concerned you might have PTSD or moral injury, the number one recommendation is going to be to seek therapy. This is going to be so huge for you in these moments. The term moral injury was coined by Dr. Jonathan Shea in his book Achilles in Vietnam in 1994. And then Dr. Litz actually formalized it in the scientific literature in 2009 in a clinical psychology review. So the working definition of moral injury is the psychological, spiritual, and social harm that comes from perpetrating, failing to prevent, or witnessing acts that transgress deeply your own moral code and your authentic values. So the World Health Organization defines burnout as a syndrome resulting in chronic workplace stress that has not successfully been managed. And burnout is fundamentally depletion showing up over time. You have chronic stress, you're having trouble managing it, and it becomes overwhelming. Now, you have rest, boundaries, and recovery, of course, all help when working towards preventing burnout. But moral injury is actually different. Moral injury is a true ethical wound. It feels like you and who you are is separate from the decisions that you're either having to make based on scenarios or the decisions that you make because of peer pressure or truly the system itself. There's a 2017 JAVMA study that found 77% of small animal vets reported economic limitations of clients. And that was made either a moderate or a primary contributor to their burnout. So having to have these financial conversations, which we say all the time at the Evolve Vets, is the thing that makes veterinary medicine hard isn't usually the medicine. It's usually the financial decisions, the customer concerns, those moments where ethics are truly challenged. And this is the data that proves that. The Journal of Internal Med found that 63% experienced moderate to severe distress from an inappropriate euthanasia, meaning a euthanasia, whether that be for behavioral reasons, financial reasons. And these are two examples that were highlighted in the moral injury lecture that I was at the AVMA. Code blue moments, or what is a play on words that I like to think about, where our careers are hitting this pivotal point. We have these alarm systems that are going off internally. Our body is speaking to us and saying that you need a break, or maybe you've just reached a point of apathy. You're not showing up and not performing well at work. Maybe you're running on caffeine, grit, and questioning how much longer you can actually sustain a fast pace in your work environment. I know that I personally had my own code blue moment years ago, and it's the thing that led me to build the Evolve Vets and the Evolve Vets method. So here's the pattern. Overcommitment plus self-abandonment leads you to burnout. It's a pattern we've been talking about, but underneath the pattern for a lot of vet professionals is this concept of moral injury. And I want to make sure that we're thinking about these repeated small moments where you acted against your own value system, your own authentic values, either because the system made you, the environment pressured you to do so, or you weren't strong enough to speak up for what you truly know is right. For example, maybe the client couldn't afford the surgery. Maybe the corporate policy limited what you could offer, or maybe you euthanized when your gut said to refer. Maybe you euthanized when a customer came in for that behavioral euthanasia. You watched a colleague make a call that you disagreed with and you sat by silently instead of speaking up. Case after case, we can find these small moments where we betray ourselves for the process. One other example that was talked about during the study is understaffing, knowing that you need to be providing better medicine or at a higher quality volume, but ultimately not having enough people, enough hands to be able to do the job well. So the thing that accumulates in these situations is not just exhaustion, it's an ethical residue. You start hustling harder, you make up for the cases that you couldn't save, you start abandoning your own limits because you don't trust that you're doing enough. You don't know how to overcorrect for this moral injury. These moments where it doesn't feel like there's another option. And it depends on your own wound, your own nervous system, your own resilience. And this is why I truly believe that doing the internal work is the thing that keeps you grounded to being successful. The old way of vet med is rewiring our brain due to chronic stress, overwhelm, and even command and control type leadership. And the new way that we're really leaning into focusing on empathy, standing up for what we believe is right, setting boundaries around the things that we really value in this life so we can have good balance inside and outside of work by separating our identity. And then, of course, activating the amygdala where fear and urgency live and just turning that down a notch by really focusing on those moments that make us us. There was a Gallup study in 2020 that showed employees led by burned out leaders were actually more likely to disengage. And so it doesn't just cost you when these moments of burnout and these moments of moral injury show up, it actually costs you your team and the people that are working alongside you. And you can't show up and perform as well because of these moments of moral injury and burnout accumulation. It's so important to process this wound where it actually lives, and to think through what you might do the next time it happens so you can stand up for your own moral values. Here's the best part about moral injury. By building your resiliency, you can actually lower your chances of facing moral injury. So let's actually dive into the Evolve Vets method on one way to build resiliency so you can have a more successful journey through veterinary medicine and create a lifelong career. So meditation is the first step of the Evolve Vet method. It's really creating awareness and connection to what lives in your subconscious brain and why you think the way that you think. So when I think about moral injury, it's important to understand when we're going through a euthanasia, why? What is the belief that I have surrounding euthanasia? Do I believe that it's good in some scenarios? Do I believe that it's bad in some scenarios? What do I believe about money? How do I see my role in customers applying for care credit or other third-party financial resources? What do I believe about insurance and vet med? And do I recommend it to most pets? And truly, the most important part with meditation is getting clear about your past so you can better understand what authentic values you have and how you want to bring those into your resiliency building. Code blue. When you hear that in the emergency room, it means a patient is coding. Everything stops. All hands lean into the highest priority. That's the energy of Code Blue coaching. It's one-on-one intensive program that I built if you're in or headed towards burnout and overwhelm right now. By using my proven Evolve Vets method, we'll walk through a 6-month program, helping you regulate your nervous system, understand your patterns, shift your limiting beliefs, and design an authentic action plan just for you. So come join me so we can bring you back to life. So next we have elevation. Elevation is going to be the way that we rewire our beliefs through neuroplasticity. You'll have role models, thought reframing, whatever it might be, to really understand what are my authentic values and how does my highest version of myself show up in these moments. So one example might be if you have a customer come to you for a behavioral euthanasia, you have full autonomy to say no to euthanizing that pet. And maybe your meditation, elevation, and integration process is centered around envisioning what you might do the next time you get asked to do a behavioral euthanasia. And that, embodying that feeling, that empowering feeling of saying no, you can own your own decision in this moment. It doesn't have to be what everybody else wants. It can truly be for you, because you are talented and you are able to make empowered choices. And our third step of the process is going to be the integration process, a walking meditation that really gets you to embody the feeling, the belief, to start living it out, protect your energy, amplify your spirit. It's not a theory, right? This is you truly applying the things that matter. So in your integration, you might envision what Bethany would do if she were to say no to a behavioral euthanasia. Leaders who practice daily meditation for 8 weeks increase their flow, grit, and emotional regulation. And these are small moments that show up. If you want to be able to be stronger against moral injury, things like meditation are really going to increase that ability to emotionally regulate and stay centered in the chaos and truly level up when it comes to resiliency building. The idea of cognitive reappraisal is reframing of the thought. It changes emotional responses at the neural level, meaning when you apply neuroplasticity and make it an action, it's the exact antidote to what moral injury requires. When we think about meditation and apply it directly to moral injury as an example, we might think about awareness. Awareness of what lives in your subconscious. What are the limiting beliefs? What are your beliefs at all when it comes to the stories that you roll through every day? Are there people that influenced you to believe a specific way? Are there cases that have shaped how you feel about this certain moment? Are you still living those moments in your body? When it comes to the Evolve method, it's really a nervous system approach to identifying and connecting to yourself and your subconscious and understanding, what do I need to make myself the most thoughtful and present veterinarian possible? Often people who are facing burnout or even moral injury might be in fight or flight more than they know it. and they probably just learned to work around it. So it's really important with meditation to really get centered, understand who you are and what you believe in. And the act of actually meditating increases the gray matter in your brain, which helps with emotional regulation. And I think when we think about moral injury in veterinary medicine and we start to use meditation, it's really where you stop compartmentalizing. Usually it's when we stuff all these things down that it gets really hard. But if you can just sit for 5 minutes and understand why you think the way that you think, what happened in your life to get you here, and then bring up that case that has been living rent-free in your head, maybe a good one, maybe a not so good one. You don't have to narrate it, just envision it, see what happens, what feelings come up in your body, what's the sentence that your brain starts repeating it to itself. It's so important to take moments to stop hustling so you can show up and just process what's going on in your world and why you feel the way you do, and really connect that back to other things that have happened in your lifetime. This is truly the first act of self-devotion and self-exploration. It is a key step in developing resiliency because you need to choose to be with yourself. You need to choose to process what's going on in your body and in your mind. And it's so important to put yourself first. Instead of just checking all the things on the to-do list, are you really prioritizing the things that matter to you? This is why meditation works. So now let's talk about what I believe the 3 steps to beating burnout. And we can kind of tie this back to moral injury. The first is going to be rest with purpose. And what that looks like is not just taking another weekend off, right? We know that that doesn't solve for burnout. That doesn't prevent moral injury, but it can actually provide a good nervous system reset to where we can get clear and do these things like meditation, elevation, and integration. I usually recommend resting with purpose out in nature. What that looks like is being outside, going on a walk. And if you're not an outdoor person, that's okay. You can find other ways to really get centered and relax. But how you just sit and be with your own thoughts and really rest and do something that you love. Another thing that I think about when I call it rest with purpose is this concept of, can you be all in, all out? And when I think about all in, all out, I think of a veterinarian that I was coaching who was overseeing multiple hospitals. And there was a moment that there was some resentment building in their life, and it was getting frustrating. And there was a moment of evaluating if the job was right for her. And when she started to look around and we started to ask questions, we started to understand why are you starting to feel this frustration, this resentment, this challenge with your team? And it's because they were calling and interfering with a very precious time of evening, which was like the dinner and bath time with her young daughter. And through this journey, we started to say, okay, can we set a boundary from 6 to 8 p.m. and just say, during this window, no one can contact me. This is just a really moment that I need to really be with my family, and I really want to prioritize this. And the beautiful part about this was, as we set the boundary and she really got clear about resting with purpose, she could be all in. People could call her on the weekend when she was at a lake house. People could connect with her, but really that sacred time, the thing that mattered for her most and was in line with her authentic values, her family, that was the thing that mattered the most to her. So if you can really get centered on what resting with purpose looks like for you, I would ask you one question. If you could go rest with purpose at any point this week, or you could rest with purpose every week, what would it be? And how do you block time to make that happen? Step number 2 of beating burnout is going to be channeling your creativity. And when I think about channeling your creativity, it is really leaning into the things that light you up, that make you so excited. And usually it could be something like dancing, playing a musical instrument, reading a book. It can be these small moments that bring you joy. Maybe it's going to a Pilates class. I love going to my Pilates class, or hang out with friends and family. Every person is going to be different, but how do you actually channel your creativity? Is it learning a new language, or maybe even reimagining a case and re-envisioning that in your mind? This is the elevation step of what we do in the Evolve Vets method. And so essentially by doing this method, you're programming in ways of showing up better and different in your life. So the question that I ask you is, what is the thing that you can do to channel your creativity? Are you painting nails? Are you doing someone's hair? Are you playing with makeup? What is the creative outlet for you? And how do you program that into a weekly routine? So that way you're always having these moments of really connecting to yourself, your heart, and your spirit. Another thing that channeling your creativity does is it actually combats the perfectionism that usually lives within veterinary medicine. So this abstract part, when we're being creative, it's often a form of experimentation. It's doing things that you haven't before. And so when we lean into this creative expression side, what we find is usually that perfectionism tones down, the grace dials up, and we can be a little bit more centered for those and the people around us. The third step of beating burnout is going to be reconnecting with your flow. And what this looks like is applying the Evolve Vets method, really leaning into neuroplasticity. So what is neuroplasticity? Neuroplasticity is doing anything that is out of the norm. So maybe let's say you usually get your hair done the same way and you decide that you're just gonna, chop it off and dye it pink or something fun. In those moments, that's really opening up and reforming new pathways that you can either choose to reaffirm by repeating it or maybe do it differently the next time. So the more open-minded you are, the more likely you are to see different things and experience life in a new way instead of it feeling mundane or kind of the same over time. So the question for this step is, what are you going to do to really channel your neuroplasticity? And the secret to channeling your neuroplasticity really goes into using the Evolve Vets method, finding ways to meditate, doing yoga, reimagining your life, doing something out of the norm. If you usually drive to work one way, just drive a different way. That's constantly triggering your brain to form new neurons and see things a new way. This elevation process is where you really get to rewire your limiting beliefs, change the way that you view the story. How is this happening for me instead of it happening to me? And really better understand the meaning through neuroplasticity, role models, and thought reframing. This is where the real work of moral injury can happen and live. But by doing neuroplasticity and changing the way we think about things, it can help build some of that resilience. It doesn't prevent moral injury altogether, but these are some things that we can do to build resiliency and make you less prone to having moral injury. Here's something about moral injury is that the wound you have might be amplified by the story that we tell ourselves about the wound. I failed that patient. If that's your limiting belief and you spiral on that thought, or maybe it's, I should have found another option. What kind of vet am I? What was I thinking? These sentences, they loop. And while they loop while you're driving at home, they loop at 3 a.m., your brain cannot tell the difference between a perceived failure and the real failure or the real threat. And so when we think about activating the stress response, every time that thought runs through your head, your body treats it as if it was already happening or it was happening in real time. And this is why moral injury can live in the body. It can build over time and it can keep triggering you based on biology alone. So when we lean into the thought of changing our neurons and changing the way we view the story, that's one way that we can impact our own risk around moral injury. When we focus on neuroplasticity, the other part that's really exciting is we have cognitive reappraisal, which is essentially thought reframing. So it really changes our emotional responses from I think I failed that patient to I made the most humane choice I possibly could in a system that gave me limited options. And it really takes that ownership off of you of like, I'm a bad vet or I'm a bad person because I euthanized that pet into I made the most humane choice in a system that gave me limited options. And that's not necessarily a spin. It's the truth. You are a good person who has very intelligent thoughts and very intelligent ways of seeking. And so when you repeat it over time, that sentence starts to win. Instead of the, why did I do this? Why am I even a veterinarian? The sentence that starts to loop is, I made the best choice I could in this environment with what I had. And that's the best I could do for this pet. When we think about cognitive reappraisal, it's the idea of our thoughts leads to our feelings, and that leads to our behaviors or actions. And then those lead to habits, and our habits lead to our lifestyle. So that's essentially what we're thinking about. When we think about the thoughts, that can actually lead to the habits and how we live our life. And so when we think about the Evolve Vets method, it's really going through this journey of changing the way that we think, hoping that we get better habits and belief systems on the other side. If this episode is landing, the deeper work lives inside the Evolve Vets membership. It's monthly coaching, vet reset meditation library, and a room full of women who get it. Come move from force to flow and really lean into living your most evolved life. Follow us at evolvevets.com. Who knows, your evolved bestie might just be waiting. During the AVMA convention, Dr. Gershon mentioned several items surrounding moral injury that might be suggested solutions. One of these solutions was advocating for pet insurance. The hope was by providing more financial resources, such as insurance or different financing options, veterinarians and veterinary staff would be less likely to be in these situations where ultimately they would no longer have to choose between the pet and the finances, because that can definitely create moral injury, because many of our authentic values is saving the pet, especially when we know they have a treatable disease. So recommendations: recommend pet insurance to young pets, as well as allow your hospital to have multiple financing options, such as Care Credit, Scratch Pay, Affirm. There's also some new ones coming out to the market that people were talking about. In the Q&A section, there was a team member that asked if we should be recommending pet insurance. We know the state of human medicine and insurance right now, where insurance is mostly dictating or directing what is allowed or not allowed for human medical professionals to perform. And that is really stressful for them. And so it was a very thoughtful question brought up during the conversation at the AVMA. Another suggested resource was Dr. G recommending us to get veterinarians involved in the selection process to be a veterinarian. So is there a world where academia allows general practitioners, ER vets, people in the field to actually volunteer and go through a journey of helping select future classes for vet schools? It's a very thoughtful question, and I participated in vet school interviews for the last probably 7 or 8 years for my alma mater. And it's been a really special experience. I always look forward to doing it, and it really makes me smile. The suggestion was to have veterinarians not only do the interviews, but also look at the applications and help grade those applications. And so that was a very thought-provoking question and helpful in thinking about how we might pivot or adapt our selection process for veterinary school. The intention behind it was to essentially say, we face the stuff in the field and we know what that experience is like. Can we help pick people who are going to have these levels of resiliency that we're looking for? So not mentioned in the lecture, but things that I personally believe would also help with moral injury is really focusing on developing that internal resiliency. So leaning into these moments of saying, yes, this is exactly what I can do to help make me stronger. Of course, it's okay to say the system has areas to grow and change, but also how can we take action and have ownership over our own lives to really build that resiliency and create a long-term sustainable career for ourselves, as well as asking the system to change in areas that we might need to improve. A third area that he had recommended was really centered around understaffing and what that process looked like. And so advocating when you feel like your team is understaffed to your leadership team and sharing that with them in a way that matters. I think it's also okay to apply the Evolve Vets method. If you feel like your team is understaffed, is there ways that you can regulate, have safety, align with what you personally believe, and then make a decision to do it differently if it's out of line with your authentic values? Maybe that looks like leaving a current place that isn't fully staffed and not working on improving it. It's one thing, of course, if your vet clinic knows that you're understaffed, but you're actively working to improve it, and maybe there's not enough hires or things to move forward with. When I was running several hospitals, like that was definitely a situation. We knew we were understaffed, but the job rec was open and we just needed more talent that wasn't there, but we were actively seeking to find ways to make it better. Versus if we know that we're just keeping it understaffed on purpose, that's definitely one thing to consider that he reported in his research. When your authentic values feel under threat and you're feeling like you need to make a decision because of a system or a structure that doesn't allow you to live aligned with your authentic values, that's a time to actually speak up. Go have psychological safety with your leadership team. Tell them that you're struggling with these decisions and you want to learn ways to work through it. When you lean into your evolution, you can really focus on what are my values and how do I stand up for them in those moments that feel separate from where I'm at today in the life that I want to lead. And then integrate that. It's really embody what it starts to feel like to be someone who stands up for the values that they believe in. Maybe you're speaking up and out against some of these things like understaffing. How can you advocate for your team to make sure you have the support you need to really elevate and grow yourself? These moments can be really hard. It can be really hard to build resiliency, to look at yourself and say, what can I have ownership in this moment? Of course, I'd love for every puppy to have insurance, but that's only 2 to 3% of pets out there. One thing that was also suggested was to do debriefs with your team. When you're struggling and make a decision that feels outside of your moral code and your authentic values, can you have an open conversation with your teammates to share the frustrations and the struggles that you're going through? Instead of packing it down and compartmentalizing and never coming back to it, can you take those moments to really dive deep, have a nervous system regulation, evaluate your beliefs around the situation, and really use this as a way to bond with your team and really bring you closer together? Find a safe person you can talk to when these situations come up. Find a therapist, a colleague, an executive coach, a coach like me, anybody that can help around moral injury and give you tools and maybe new ideas on how to show up authentic to you, because you deserve to live an aligned life and you deserve to have a sustainable career in veterinary medicine. One other tip is use the boundaries that are also authentic to you. Use the all in, all out approach that we talked about during this episode and find a way to create safety in your nervous system to help build that resiliency. You're allowed to speak up for the things you believe in. You're allowed to disagree with people. You can be safe and still disagree and have different opinions, and you can still take care of yourself in really big ways, despite some of the challenges that we see in the veterinary hospitals. Being a veterinarian is an amazing career. And while there are hardships and things that challenge us, the truth of the matter is you deserve to be here. You deserve to speak up for the things that made you great and amazing. And we have the autonomy to really do the inner work so we can continue to show up time and time again, the best version of ourselves. Please do the work. Metabolize these thoughts, these feelings. Start to stand up for yourself instead of carrying it for a decade and waiting for a system to change. Can you have a moment, 10 minutes a day, to do a meditation, to get centered on how you handle these situations and how you speak up for yourself in a moment where you have moral injury? I'm going to invite you to do an exercise with me. Pick one case this week, just one. Sit with it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not to fix it. You don't have to change anything. Just understand what happened to you, what happened to the pet. Why did this case feel like you were going against your authentic values? That's it. Just start to notice how it feels in your body. I will give you a real life example of a moral injury moment for me as a veterinarian. I worked a late swing shift on Friday, and I saw probably the cutest dog in the whole wide world, and it was incredibly tough for me. It was a 6-month-old Rottweiler who I diagnosed with parvovirus. The dog had been vomiting and having diarrhea for about 6 days. This dog was QAR, very lethargic, but pulses were normal, not in shock at this moment. Heart rate normal, everything, blood pressure was good. But in this moment, I had a moment of anger for that customer. In my head, I was thinking, you paid thousands of dollars for this dog and we did not get it vaccinated. Like, can we please just vaccinate this dog? And I felt myself growing angry, and I chose to remove myself from the car. And I walked inside, took a moment to breathe, did a little 3-breath break, box breathing, and found myself saying like, okay, Bethany, you're feeling angry. That's a normal feeling to have. That's totally understandable. And can I focus on the goal of getting this patient everything that she needs So it's not about me. It's not about this owner. There's no blame to place. Like, we're in this moment together, and all I care about is making sure the pet's okay, right? That's why we vaccinate in the first place, is to make sure your pet is healthy and okay. And right now, I can't go back in time. I can't change the fact that the vaccines weren't given. I can't, talk to the owner and be like, please, please, please give the vaccines. Like, that's not going to work. But what I can do is treat this pet right now, focus on the present moment, and focus on that dog. And I'm so thankful that I had that open-ended conversation, that I took that moment to go process that moral injury, because it was a moral injury for me, because we were likely going to have to euthanize this pet. And it was a really hard moment for me as a veterinarian, knowing that I could have treated this disease process had we given the vaccines. And right now, money was standing between a treatment process that potentially could go well and euthanizing a pet. And it was heartbreaking for me. I truly struggled with it. I cried a little bit. But when I came back to talk to that customer, it was seamless. He was so kind. He told me the reason he was having financial issues because his mom was sick and dealing with some really challenging stuff. And because I was able to go and focus on the pet and the fact that we couldn't change any of the past and release my anger and talk to him about why I didn't think euthanasia was the right chance, we were able to luckily work together, find some grant-funded options for this baby. So he was able to take his baby to a place that offers much lower care because it's supported by a grant. And because we were able to pause and I was able to do the meditation process and get centered around my emotions, we were actually able to work through to a amazing option for this pet. I don't know if this pet lived or didn't live. That's part of being in the emergency room. You never really know what happens to them after they leave, but I'm proud of myself for regulating so then I could lean into this moment of, can we work together to focus on what options we have for your pet? Because it feels wrong to jump to euthanasia right now, knowing that there are other options on the table. So get clear. Do your Evolve Vets method, rewire your neuroplasticity, learn how to integrate and show up for yourself in these difficult moments, in these difficult conversations, because truly these will be the ritual habits and systems that protect you and protect you from moral injury, from burnout, from compassion fatigue. And it doesn't mean it's never going to happen, but when those moments and those divots happen, can you bring yourself back? So I hope you enjoyed deep diving the concept of moral injury, some real life examples of what it means to me, and hopefully you're leaving not feeling more sad about being in veterinary medicine. I really hope you're leaving this podcast with me as a fact that there is hope. There are things we can do differently, both independently and as a system, and we both can work together to really continue to make veterinary medicine the best career that there is out there. Together, let's stop revolving and start evolving. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to the Evolve Vets podcast. It truly means the world to me. If this episode supported you or sparked something new in you, please go to evolvevets.com to become a member or join our coaching program and truly continue this work beyond the podcast. Let's evolve together.